Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of January 24th, 2021. Today, we are going to hear and watch a fascinating presentation on emerging virtual reality technologies, and then discuss the implications of these technologies. But first, I will introduce our panel for today. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. With us, we have Art Ramon Garcia, our director of visual art. We have Charlie Kam, our director of marketing and 2020 U.S. presidential candidate. We have Alexandria Black, our director of community resilience. And we have Jose Cordero, our technology advisor and foreign ambassador in Spain. And our guest is Sever Vlad Sfrengeu. He is a virtual reality entrepreneur. He has a YouTube channel called Sever, S-E-V-R, and he is an expert on virtual reality technologies. He also interviews many notable transhumanists on his channel, and he has a fascinating set of slides for us today, as well as an explanation of what has been happening with virtual reality technologies just over this past year. Some of us may have missed this because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but advances in these technologies and their availability to consumers have really been quite phenomenal. So Sever, welcome, and please proceed with your presentation.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And for today, as Gennady was saying, I prepared a presentation about the current state of virtual reality. Also, why it's important to talk about this right now. And we're also going to look at some future applications of VR and how this relates with transhumanism, in my opinion. Full disclosure, I do work in virtual reality, so I'm obviously excited about what's going on, but I'll try to be as objective as possible and not get too excited about the current state of the industry. But for the people that are not familiar with VR at all, I can only say that it's going overwhelmingly well, to the point where suppliers can't really keep up with the demand. So I'm going to share my screen. I prepared a brief presentation, and let me just do this here. Okay, so if everyone can see my screen, I'm just looking at the reactions. Okay, so it seems like everyone can see it. Let me just start this. So I want to start with some basic misconceptions about virtual reality. Can everyone see it properly? Let's just check one more time.
Yes, we can see your slideshow. The main slide is virtual reality, fact and future, and then the next slide is two main misconceptions.
Okay, so okay, I don't know how to make that full screen, but I hope it's large enough for everyone to see. So yeah, the two main misconceptions about virtual reality, it's, first of all, this used to be true. The fact that it's used to be very expensive as a technology. And the second misconception is probably the fact that it's a technology used only for gaming. And I think it's best to start with the expensive component first, because that's, with any new emerging technology that enters the market, it's important for the technology to find its product market fit from a price perspective and from the value that it delivers. So in virtual reality, we have two different kinds of headsets. And I want to start with these two categories so I can make a comparison between the prices and how everything kind of evolved in the past 3 years. The first type of headset we have, it's a tethered headset. That means, as you can see in the pictures, it needs a cord to connect to a computer graphics card. So For these particular headsets, you will need a very high performance laptop or computer, which used to cost anywhere from $2,500 to $4,000. And the issue with this is the fact that, of course, not everyone has, $3 to $4,000 to spend on a new piece of technology. And the setup, it's also more complicated. But of course, the quality and the fidelity of the graphics, it's way higher due to the fact that these headsets are connected to a computer. Now, this wasn't an issue for gamers, for people that purchase VR in order to either play games or activities of that nature, because these people already had the performant laptop or computer. But if a new person wanted to get into VR without any prior experience or without any gaming, I would say, interest, you would have to purchase around $3,000 worth of equipment just to be able to run VR. And as far as the users of the tethered headsets, we can see here that by March 2020, which is pretty much before the pandemic, and I structured it like this so I can present it in a way that you guys can see the impact that the pandemic had on the industry. So as you can see, before the pandemic in March 2020, there were around 2 million headsets connected to the Steam VR, which is the largest platform for games. I don't know if you've heard of Steam, but if you're looking into games at all, Steam is probably the most popular one right now. So after the tethered headsets were released, right, in I would say the consumer versions of most headsets were between 2016 and 2019. Then in 2019, something very interesting happened. And that's when the first, I would say, worth mentioning, untethered headset came to the market. And that was the first Oculus Quest. And this is the headset right here. I actually have it next to me. So the Oculus Quest 1 came out in 2019. And as you can see, on this graph, the usage kind of skyrocketed. But the way it happened is very interesting, because when the Quest came out, a lot of people were excited, a lot of people were getting it, but these were people, that are passionate about VR. So for us, in the industry, that's not really a big deal, because, people that are already passionate about this technology, they're going to purchase the newest headsets and the newest hardware automatically. But what they've seen, it was a surge in people that have never used VR before or are not even really interested in games, started purchasing the headset. So this was the Oculus Quest 1 in 2019. I think it came out in May, if I'm not mistaken. So ever since things started catching on, people started buying the headset, on an untethered side. And this particular headset, when it came out, it really revolutionized the whole space, because for $400, you can get the whole thing without a PC, without the need for a connection. You don't need to plug any cords in. All you need is this piece of hardware, the headset. It comes with 2 controllers, and you're good to go. So, people took, I would say, at least half a year to probably almost a year to kind of realize what's going on, and to even understand the fact that they can purchase an untethered headset and they don't need a PC. So the communication towards, from a public relations point of view on Oculus side was very important during those times. So now this was all before the pandemic. And as you may imagine, the pandemic impacted the VR industry in a huge way. It's just common sense, right? People are spending more time home. They're trying new technologies for either remote communication or remote events or different things that they might want to experience from the comfort of their homes with the help of virtual reality. And if we're looking at 2020 and why it was the best year for VR, I personally want to kind of quote one of the Oculus spokespeople that they were saying that in the Q3 of 2020, they took major steps forwarding in building the next computing platform. They launched the Quest 2, our most advanced virtual reality headset, right in time for the holidays. It delivers a real sense of presence, like you're right there with another person or in another place. And we've worked hard to make it accessible to more people. It's lighter, faster, has a sharper screen, and the new price point of just $300. Pre-orders have outpaced the original Quest pre-orders more than 5 times and have surpassed our expectations. So what they're really talking about is this piece of hardware here, which is the Oculus Quest 2. So back to, where we kind of left off. The Oculus Quest 1 was selling, not, I would say, a bestseller kind of situation, but because the supply chain was broken during COVID, they weren't able to satisfy as many orders as they were coming in. So while, again, the Quest 1 was backtracked and they couldn't sell as many as they would want to because of the supply chain issue, Oculus took, I would say, a very courageous step in launching the second version of the Quest, which came out, if I'm not mistaken, in October 2020. So this was probably the most important inflection point in our whole industry, because when the Quest 2 came out, not only that it was cheaper than the Quest 1 with around $100, so you could get one of these systems, and you still can, for $299 without having the need of a computer or anything else. The Quest 2 was also a way more improved headset from a user experience point of view. It's lighter, it's easier to maneuver, and the headset itself has some upgrades that are brilliant, in my opinion. And on top of that, they're selling it at a price point of $300, which, at least for the people in the United States, it can be an impulse buy. It can really be something that you are just grabbing out of curiosity, right? And Oculus Quest 2 made this possible for us. So if we're looking at some numbers, you can see the cumulative revenue, the content revenue for the Quest. You can see the way it kind of grew from October 2019, from it was at around, I would say, 25 million. Right now it's at, I would say, in the graph that you guys see there, it's 150 million, but this was during the summertime, during August. This is the most recent data we could find, but right now it's probably at least at $300 million. And this is just the content that developers are selling through, to the Quest headset. So right now, back to present in 2021, we've already had almost half a year of the Quest 2. As I've said, everyone is very satisfied. And in technology, there's a term called product market fit. When you're launching a new product, you usually try to improve the product and to tweak the device in order for the particular product to achieve its product market fit. And what does that really mean? It means that the customers are pulling the product from you more than you can even produce it, right? They're actually pre-ordering the product in a way that you can't even satisfy the demand. And that's a good sign. So also currently, we have some recent data from September 2020. On a monthly basis, as you can see, developers made around $12.5 million. Again, not a big number for a technology industry, but we have to focus on the rate of growth, I would say, rather than the numbers at this point. And if we're looking at the rate of growth, it looks actually pretty decent. Now, for the overall software sales, again, this is some data from 2019, and as you can see, with the with the green color, we have the Oculus Quest, which was the most impactful headset ever since it got launched. And the other headsets, they were still growing, but I can say that lately the usage of the tethered headsets probably dropped compared to the untethered headsets, which is a good thing because not everyone, again, has the resources to purchase a computer that's very expensive to run a tethered headset. So now, if we're looking at the second bias, I would say, remember in the beginning we mentioned the fact that VR has two main misconceptions. The first one is the fact that it's too expensive, and we covered that briefly so far. And the second misconception is that VR, it's only for gaming. And we can look at different applications at different industries where VR is prevalent and it actually helps. And I prepared here a slide with almost all the companies that are present in virtual reality today. And this is a landscape that I found on the Virtual Reality Fund. I think it's the venturerealityfund.com if you want to go and look it up for yourself for when the 2020 industry landscape is going to come out. But as you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but I'll try to point out the different sectors. So as you can see, on the location-based side, there are a lot of companies that are doing VR arcades. Also, on the sports live events, again, there are, I would say, some major sports leagues that have picked up VR, the NBA, the MLB in some cases. They were releasing different games through VR rather than the regular screen. And of course, in social, in games, there's a lot of activity in entertainment. There are a lot of 3D movies, VR, 3D animated stories that are very interesting. In enterprise, also, it's worth mentioning that there are several companies working on either training employees. I've seen Walmart, it's using VR to train new employees. It's also useful at using VR for soft skills training. And also in healthcare, we've seen a lot of activities. I'm not too sure if you can see the name of those companies in that space right there, but Vivid Vision, for example, it's one company that's using VR to treat lazy eye. Psyos, it's a mental health platform based in Spain who has been around for, I would say, 3-4 years, and they're doing great work. Limbix, it's a company here based in Palo Alto who used to do exposure therapy for VR. I think they got acquired by another company right now. But I just wanted to present you the overall landscape of VR. And as you can see, there are many companies in many spaces other than just gaming. And for today's presentation, I wanted to go over the mental health space just briefly for two reasons. One, because it's probably something that I'm more familiar with, having done a project in mental health a couple of years ago. And the second thing that I consider it to be important in presenting the VR for mental health is the fact that there's such a huge impact in the space, especially at an academy level. Researchers are working with different patients for different clinical trials in different mental health disorders. And I think that for the future is going to be a very important solution that will either augment the traditional therapy or it will almost replace it in some cases. So for example, some of the use cases in mental health. Let's start with the most obvious one, which is exposure therapy. So for virtual reality, it's worth considering the immersion component and the way it triggers your emotions. And more than your conscious mind, it actually triggers your limbic system in a way where you will feel certain sensations because your brain cannot really make the difference between the real world and a simulated world. And if you haven't tried VR yet or haven't experienced with this technology, I highly recommend you actually don't take my word for it. You have to try it out in order to experience that sense of immersion. It's hard for someone to explain and to try to present it to you, to convince you if you haven't tried it. But if it was for us to just imagine the common sense applications from an exposure therapy point of view, again, you might have a spider phobia, or you might be scared of flying. Again, in the spider phobia component, it's maybe not a mandatory life and death situation that you have to overcome that in order to live better life. But in order, if someone has, either flight phobia or something within those lines that they can't really operate in a normal way in their daily life, then VR can help with that. And how it works on exposure therapy level, it's again pretty obvious and pretty common sense. The fact that you would immerse the patient in that particular environment that they want to overcome, and you would gradually expose them to the stimuli that provokes that particular trigger in their behavior. So, if somebody has agoraphobia, where they're scared of going out in public in places with a lot of people, you can immerse them in a virtual scenario, and they can try to do that before they actually go in the real world and try to experience that. Now, another application for VR, it's of course mindfulness, and there are studies done with cognitive behavioral therapy and also with the mindfulness component. And VR can really transport you in a different scenario, in a different environment, in 5 seconds. So you can imagine any place in the world you would like to meditate or to experience a feeling on mindfulness, and you can teleport yourself there. There are several apps for this. There are guided meditations that kind of walk you through the whole experience, but you can also customize your own. And this is for people that whether practice mindfulness or yoga or meditation. This is a way for them to augment the practice. And if you haven't tried it, again, it's kind of hard to explain how it works and how it triggers your emotions in a positive way. But it's worth keeping in mind that VR can be very effective as far as mindfulness. And now I just wanted to mention this because this is also important for clinician training. When new clinicians are getting onboarded, they can simulate scenario with either an artificial intelligence avatar, where that particular avatar would embody the patient, and the clinician would have to go through the procedure with the patient. But the whole time, the AI, it's programmed to either raise the difficulty level of the training or to gradually expose the clinician to different scenarios that they might have to deal with in the real world. And now, of course, there are several other, as I mentioned, clinical trials and interesting projects in the space. And I would say the space is mostly dominated by universities. At Stanford, there is a lab for VR ran by Dr. Greenleaf. It's worth keeping in mind. There are also VR labs at Harvard. For example, the VR lab at Harvard has been around since the 50s or 60s, when it used to cost $1 million for a person to experience VR. So I would say that, yeah, there is a lot of activity, and mostly in the academic space, researchers are actually doing great progress. Now, from a future point of view and where VR is currently compared to where it's going to be, I think it's worth mentioning something that kind of blew my mind when I realized it before I even got into the space. And this particular, realization was, for me, the fact that most of the technologies that we consider sci-fi and very, I would say, far away in the future, they are actually available right now. And if anyone has seen the movie Ready Player One, I use this as a comparison in the presentation because it's a very popular, I think, Steven Spielberg movie that came out in 2018. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's a great movie to look at the future of VR and to probably imagine the scenario that they're portraying in this particular movie, as in the fact that it's actually a possibility for us to end up in a world like that. And just brief, I would say, a brief description of the movie. The action happens in the year, I think, in the 2030s or 2070s. But the bottom line is the idea that the protagonists are living in a dystopian society where people refuse to live in the real world anymore because it's all kind of trashed out, and it's all a slum, and they spend more time in their houses in virtual reality devices. And there's the scientists who built a huge company by building a game called the Oasis. So the Oasis is really a place where people put their headsets on and they escape the ugly dystopian real world. And afterwards, of course, it's going to develop into I would say, classic Hollywood story. It's going to be a little bit of love and all the other ingredients that is going to make it a mainstream movie. But the technology component, it's very interesting because if you're going to watch Ready Player One, you're going to see different technologies that might seem mind-boggling, right? And if you see in this picture, these guys are on a omnidirectional treadmill. And this thing looks like this. You get the VR headset on and you're walking on an omnidirectional treadmill. So you're pretty much walking in VR. And the reason I'm bringing up, again, these kind of technologies, because I want to update everyone to the fact that these are all available right now. And they're, I would say, almost affordable, right? Mainly if you live in the United States, I think it's very feasible for a person to get these kind of technologies right now. So, for example, this particular treadmill that you guys see in the picture, it's called the Cat VR, and I actually purchased one for $1,000. And it's just mind-boggling how the body reacts to the stimuli that it gets from the five senses, right? So you're getting the sensation that you're walking and that you're kind of spinning in VR when you're actually on a, again, multi-directional treadmill, just kind of tied down there and you're in your headset. But yeah, the technology is available right now. I was able to get one, and you can look up, there are different companies that are making this. And there are also different arcades that let you try this technology. Another very interesting technology that was present in the movie, it's a thing called a haptic suit, which means that the haptic suit allows us to feel the virtual reality from a tactile point of view. So a couple of things that the suit does in the movie and also in the real world is the fact that it allows us, again, to feel the virtual reality. It does motion capture, so it can optimize everything in real time by capturing our body in the virtual world. And the TENS/EMS in the picture, I'm not too sure exactly if this is the feature that has to do with the temperature changing, but the suit does have a component where it changes temperature depending on what environment you're walking in. So if I walk into a very hot environment, the suit will heat up automatically. If I walk into an Arctic, North Pole kind of frozen environment, the suit is going to decrease its temperature according to the space that I'm walking in. And that also gives an extra feeling of immersion. And you can just imagine, how mind-boggling it is that we're able to simulate the full spectrum of sensations through virtual reality, not just our, I would say, eyes and, sound, the ears. We're also able to stimulate the whole tactile system of the body through the suit. The suit is actually called the Tesla suit. It doesn't have anything to do with the company Tesla. This is a company from Europe, and they're currently working with corporations they're selling this as a training tool. And I'm not too sure if it's available for a consumer yet, but again, people can still get their hands on it if they really want to, work with this kind of technology. The next one, it's a haptic glove, which again, just like the suit, works in a way that it allows you to interact with the virtual reality world. You can grab objects, you can feel the virtual reality world in your hands. And as you can see in this picture, there are multiple ways of doing it. These people are doing it with different sensors. Tesla suit also have their own solution, which is the glove all the way to the left. They're kind of using a different technology where the tension is getting is pulling your hand according to the way it interacts with the virtual reality world. But yeah, these are also technologies that are available right now, and we can also feel the VR worlds with our hands, and we can interact with them. Now, another technology that's also fascinating, and it's also, again, available as we speak, it's a technology that allows us to smell the virtual world that we interact with. And this particular device, it's called Feel Real. And the way it works, it's pretty much an extra device that attaches to your headset. So if I get my headset on like this smell device would come somewhere around here, like right on top of my nose. And this device, Feel Real, is releasing different senses according to the virtual reality environment you're in. For the technology behind this, the way it works, they have, I would say, 5 to 8 different cartridges with different smells, and through different combinations of smells, they're able to kind of come up with any smell you can imagine in the world, and they're able to transmit that in real time while you're exploring while you're exploring different virtual worlds with this technology attached. So far, we've seen that, with the current technologies that are available, we can pretty much immerse ourselves completely in the virtual world, right? We have the regular, sight and I would say audio. With the headset, we can get on a suit, we can walk on a treadmill, we can even add on this device that allows us to smell the VR. And again, this is all available right now, and it's not very expensive to get. But if we're looking at the future, and probably, one of the best ways to start with what the future holds, is to mention something that, again, is currently available. That is a brain-computer interface, a non-invasive brain-computer interface that attaches to a VR headset. And this is a company that came out a couple of years ago, which is called Neurable. But there are several other companies that are working on BCIs for VR. I'm not so sure if anyone is familiar with Emotive, which is a company that is doing some kind of a non-invasive brain-computer interface, but right now they're working on something for VR. As you can see, that's really the next level of virtual reality, where we can control these virtual worlds only with our brain signals, with our mind. So right now, again, there's a lot to discuss on the BCI side, because I personally think that probably all of these devices are really going to merge into one small, simple device that's really just going to be a brain-computer interface. But until we get there, whether through Neuralink or another company, it's still worth mentioning the fact that there are VR BCIs available, and that people are using them for different applications, and they're actually developing the technology as we speak. So now, from future transhumanistic point of view, I wanted to bring up a couple of I would say outside the box ideas that they're probably, these things are discussed for the past probably 30 years, right, in sci-fi movies and in different games. But I think we are closer than ever to understand and to kind of get that intuitive feeling of how all of these technologies are going to develop and to evolve into something that first is going to become indistinguishable from reality, right? If we get to that fidelity level where we can stimulate each, I would say, sense in our body with the highest accuracy possible, where again we forget that we're in a simulation, we're going to be able to choose what reality we want to live in. We're going to be able to switch between these realities on a daily basis. People are not going to be limited to living in just one virtual slash real world. When these concepts are going to merge, right, when all the technologies are going to be connected to the cloud, VR, it's also going to be one of them, and you're going to be able to choose your reality on a daily basis. I also mentioned the concept of mind uploading in digital worlds. I personally hope that mind uploading is going to be possible, but I have a question that I ask myself in regards to mind uploading. Let's assume that we're going to be able to either upload ourselves in a cyborg slash robot kind of body and interact with the real world. But I assume that if that's possible, we're also going to be able to upload ourselves in a virtual world. So the question gets more complicated when you're thinking about, okay, what kind of virtual worlds you're going to live in, you're going to want to experience, what kind of virtual worlds we're going to build, how are these virtual worlds going to impact our lives when we can't even distinguish between a virtual simulated reality and the real world. And these are all questions worth mentioning because the future is happening faster than we ever thought. And somebody needs to also ask some ethical questions in regards to these virtual worlds. I mean, you can imagine the level of, I would say, abuse, right, that could happen in some virtual worlds with, people getting hacked or people getting, just imagine somebody kind of infiltrating your whole perception, right? If you're in a virtual world indistinguishable from reality, a hacker can actually come and, change what you see or change kind of the whole, the way you interact with that virtual world. And it's worth thinking about these factors as well, because they're always going to be bad actors. So how are we going to overcome these issues in VR? It's still a challenge. In the gaming community, there are still challenges with trolls or cyber bullies or people of that nature. This is going to be present in VR as well. But again, what's going to happen when we are completely fully immersed in these worlds and we're not able to disconnect as we might want to in a timely manner before we experience anything that might traumatize us? This doesn't mean we have to stop making progress. It doesn't mean that we have to be scared of this technology in no way, shape, or form. But I think that looking at the way it's currently going and the way it's currently developing, it's a no-brainer. It's really common sense, the fact that this is going to become indistinguishable from reality. And again, probably one click away from our, it's not going to take not even 2 minutes to load up yourself in a new virtual world. It's probably just going to be a BCI button that you can press at any point. But yeah, this was the main points I wanted to go over and to kind of update everyone about the VR industry. Again, I work in the space, so I might be a little excited about this, but without even me kind of putting my own subjective input into this presentation, just by looking at the numbers, we can see that there's a lot of activity. Of course, there are some issues with everything that's growing fast. The rate of learning also has to be fast. So Facebook, who owns Oculus, the major player in the VR space, they're still learning how to do things right. We all know that Facebook sometimes might not have the most ethical practices. And this shows also in VR as well, but that's a whole different story, which I will just let people in our space deal with and kind of worry about. But yeah, hopefully Facebook is going to do the right thing and I would say implement more ethical practices in their VR business. Right now that the many lawsuits are coming towards them, and hopefully they're going to learn something from this. But the main point, as if it was to make a conclusion, is the fact that yes, VR is growing faster than ever. Facebook is the main major player. They're pushing the industry. Of course, this comes at costs that maybe some competitors might suffer because the way Facebook is able to sell this very cheap hardware, and they're able to accommodate the high demand. And yeah, this was the virtual reality, I would say, fact and future presentation. And for now, I will be ready to answer any questions or comments. I'm also looking at the screen currently here to see if there are any more participants.
Yes, thank you, Sever.
Did I have to? Yeah.
We appreciate your presentation. It was quite informative as to the current state of virtual reality technologies, as well as the possible opportunities and future trajectories. And we do have a number of questions already in the internal chat as well as the YouTube chat. So the first question is a clarification question from Jose Cordero, who asks about the name of the Spanish company that you mentioned that would be involved in VR.
Yeah, so the name of that company, it's Psios. It's P-S-I-O-U-S. So yeah, it's called Psios VR, and they're one of the first people to actually release a platform for mental health in virtual reality. And I just looked it up. Their website, it's psious.com.
psious.com. All
Yeah.
right, thank you very much. And in our YouTube chat, Casey Amer states that the Quest was great for getting random family members into trying the VR. So that is an illustration of how the demographics for these technologies are being broadened by the untethered headsets. Now, Casey also says, quote, "I'm still waiting for Google Glass to come back." Do you think Google Glass is going to make a comeback and augmented reality types of technologies as well, which Mike Lazine asks with regard to whether they could be possible contenders to disrupt VR's popularity?
So AR and VR are usually going hand in hand, and we've always, in our space, in the industry, we've always stayed very close to the AR folks and the people that are working on AR technologies. Google Glass, in my personal opinion, was too early. So even though the technology might have been good, I never tried it, I'm not too sure. But I think it was too early for it to become adapted on a mainstream level. Now, as far as AR, there are several companies that are launching new headsets as far as augmented reality headsets. And for the people that probably don't really know much about the AR space, augmented reality, it's like adding digital objects into the real world. So if you remember Pokemon Go or any, AR filter on your phone that you kind of, take a picture or video of, and it automatically changes your face. That's also AR. Or you can, again, look through your phone in the room, scan the room, and add different digital objects. Now, this all has to be simplified by a pair of glasses that are going to become mainstream. We don't have one yet that I would say it's worth mentioning for the way it's growing or the way it's being adapted. But Nreal, I would say it's solution that I've recently seen as far as AR, and it's spelled N, the letter N, real. And these are, again, available for purchase, but I think that AR and VR are strictly related to each other, are going hand in hand. And I don't think that it will ever be a competition between the two. Like, who's going to, I would say, achieve mass adoption faster, AR or VR? Well, so far, it seems like VR, it's leading, but again, who knows what's going to come out on the AR side. But yeah, there are a lot of promising projects.
Yes, thank you for that answer. And then Alexandria Black asks, are there any distributed platforms that are likely to compete with Steam? What are your thoughts on that?
So the Oculus Store is the main platform for VR. Now, I know that I mentioned mostly Oculus as a major player, and I presented mostly the Oculus Quest headsets, which again, Oculus, it's owned by Facebook. But as far as competitors, there are other people in the space. One of them is Vive, which is made by HTC. If you've heard of HTC Vive, that's the name of the headset. And they also have their own store where I think that Vive actually kind of revolutionizes the business model because their store is on a subscription basis. So you can sign up for their store on a monthly basis subscription, and you can play, I think, unlimited games, which again, on Steam, if you go, you have to purchase each game separately. On a Vive, you don't have to. But these are the major players. Steam, it's still a major player for the tethered headsets. The Vive store, I would say, it's still around, but not too crowded, not too relevant in my opinion. And the Oculus Store, it's the main one right now, the most active one. And as a person from behind the scenes looking at this, it's also hard to get on the Oculus Store. Like they have a very, very high quality standard. So developers that apply to get their application on the Oculus Store, sometimes they're having a hard time just because the Oculus standards are so high, and that's great for the consumers. But yeah, Steam and Oculus is probably the most relevant platforms right now.
All right, thank you. And Alexandria also states that she's interested in VR as a productivity and artistic platform. Is there robust app development for such uses?
So there are, and again, there are several solutions for remote offices and remote working solutions in VR. So, for example, Oculus came out with their own virtual reality office, and what it does, I can really, get my headset on, and for example, instead of I have a screen here, I have another screen here, I have all of my stuff on the desk. In VR, I can really place them in a 3D way wherever I want around me, and I can turn around and kind of interact with them. To be honest, that seems cool and it looks cool in videos, but I think that it's still causing a lot of friction in order for it to be able to work properly. Like, for example, even the keyboard in VR, there are applications that kind of project a keyboard on any surface, and you can, use it in VR, but I would say it's still not as practical as the real world. So from a productivity point of view, even if I want to say as many good words as possible about VR, I can say that it's currently there yet. Like it didn't really achieve anything that makes a significant improvement in productivity. So I wouldn't really put my money on it yet for productivity tools.
Now, this is an interesting follow-up question. Do you think within the next decade it would be possible to hold virtual enlightenment salons like this one in fully immersive VR that would then get live streamed to a worldwide audience, and the way that people would see it, let's say they're watching it on a flat computer screen, would be as if essentially all of the participants were sitting around in a particular conference room, and it would be of a quality essentially indistinguishable from an in-person meeting?
Right. So in the next 10 years, for sure, it will become indistinguishable, almost indistinguishable, I would say. But for currently, what's available, I mean, this is available right now. There are several either enterprise apps that allows for virtual events with people all around the world. There is also I would say worth exploring the social VR apps, which were developed initially as social games. But if you know about Second Life, it's a situation where you can take a social VR game and kind of use it for whatever you want, right? Like you can send all of the people that are supposed to attend your event, right? The transhumanism event. You would tell them, hey, we're meeting in this social VR world at this time. And you can do it like that. But again, there are companies that are focusing strictly on this. One of them that I know of that currently got very good feedback, it's Engage. And the company Engage, which their website is engagevr.io, it's doing corporate events and also different presentations where you're able to share either PowerPoints, you're able to share PDFs, you're able to kind of collaboratively work and present with other team members if you want to. And this works on VR, desktop, and mobile. So let's say I can connect from my VR headset. You guys can connect from anything you want. You can connect from your desktop, or you can connect from your mobile, or if somebody doesn't have the headset, maybe in the audience, they can still attend. And as far as recording and streaming to YouTube, yeah, that's also possible. VR allows screen recording, like any computer, so you can do that if you want to share it afterwards. But for live streaming, Oculus has a software there. It's directly, I would say, connected to Facebook. So since Facebook owns Oculus, you're able to stream live in real time on Facebook. Now, as far as YouTube, there must be some kind of app that allows you to do that. But currently, like inbuilt system wise, it's Facebook live streaming. So that's possible right now, but probably in 10 years is going to become more indistinguishable from the real world.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And I would hope an alternative to Facebook live streaming emerges, because one of the difficulties with a Facebook live stream is I don't know of a way to save the video or import it to another platform, but perhaps there will be workarounds for that.
Yeah.
Now, Gabriel So says, thank you so much for all of this information on VR and AR, Sever, and he wants to know if the latest iPhone 12 Plus Pro Max with 5G telecommunication speed would have any useful AR apps for daily team cooperation projects, including transhumanist projects. Do you know of any iPhone 12 functionality with VR?
So that's actually a great question, because the iPhone 12 is actually the only phone in the recent years that came out with a huge improvement for AR particularly. So that's a great question. And the technology, it's a LiDAR. It's um, and I'm actually going to read the official definition that I found here. You know that Apple promises better low light focus, up to 6 times faster in low light conditions. So the LiDAR depth sensing, it's also used to improve night portrait mode effects, and it also the impact it has on AR. You can pretty much get your iPhone with your LiDAR scanner and scan a whole room or a whole environment in the real world, and you can turn it into a 3D asset that translates into a virtual world. So you can really scan everything around you with this LiDAR scanner, with this LiDAR sensor, and you can turn it into a virtual reality, probably game or environment, by using that. But the probably the most impactful technology that was released as far as AR, it's this LiDAR technology that stands for light detection and ranging. And it says that it works in a similar way to radar, only it uses lasers to judge distances and depth. So that's probably the most relevant thing you can think of in recent years as far as AR. Yeah, the LiDAR technology from the new iPhone.
Excellent. That is fascinating. Now, Mike Lazine says, quote, "If I had the money, I would love to get the HoloLens glasses when they're available as a consumer version, and to use them with Autodesk Maya, if possible, in the future." And I know the HoloLens has been around for a number of years, but Microsoft is primarily focused on industrial applications. Do you know of any prospects for a consumer version of the HoloLens? And if so, how likely is it to be affordable to many consumers in the coming years?
So HoloLens, I think it currently costs $5,000, and it is directed towards enterprise, mostly industrial, different projects of that nature. But I think it's worth mentioning another company, just so you can kind of see why these AR headsets, mixed reality headsets, haven't really got to the consumer point yet. I don't know if you remember Magic Leap, but Magic Leap was a company that was probably the most interesting company in 2018 in our space. They were able to raise $2 billion pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-anything, right? And they worked on this new technology with light field waves, and with different proprietary, I would say, approaches to AR. So anyway, they built this headset, and they couldn't sell it for less than $2,000, because that technology is still expensive, right? So if you look at, again, the Magic Leap headset that wanted to kind of come out on a consumer side in 2018-19, they sold about 6,000 copies for a $2,000 headset that they released. So it was the worst failure, right, in the whole probably AR space ever. The fact that they had $2 billion and they still weren't able to take a product to market and to release it in a consumer version that's affordable. So it's worth looking at Magic Leap and learning some lessons from there, that you can't really push a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 product on the consumer side. It's impossible. People are not going to buy it. And second of all, I think that it's probably still very early for mixed reality technologies to make sense on a consumer level, unless you're doing some work with them, in my opinion. So yeah, the HoloLens, I personally don't know if they're planning on doing anything for consumer, but these are still very expensive for people to be able to buy them, on a consumer side.
And this Magic Leap story is certainly interesting to consider. Now,
Mhm.
if one were one of those early adopters who got the headset for $2,000, would it still be usable today? Or if the company stopped supporting it in some way, would it become dysfunctional?
Well, I think it's usable because they have different partnerships with different movie studios, with different big corporations that are making their own app for the headset. But um, what I know is the fact that they pivoted from a consumer approach. Right now, they're selling enterprise solutions only. Um, what I also know is the fact that even if you were able to, even if you have a Magic Leap and you are using it with or without updates, I still haven't heard nobody saying that I use my Magic Leap on a daily basis, or I love my Magic Leap so much I go to sleep with it, or I use it obsessively. So usage for Magic Leap, probably even if everything works properly as far as updates, I don't think there's much because again, people look, let's be honest, the technology is not as impressive as it should, right? For a company with that much funding and that many resources, the technology is still not there yet. So even if people are still using it on a daily basis, it I don't know anyone to enjoy that headset so much. So yeah.
Now, that speaks to a certain platform risk with regard to virtual reality technologies. And we have, of course, been not so much introduced, but schooled in the concept of platform risk on social media, where social media companies that people have relied on sometimes for more than a decade suddenly and radically change their behavior, sometimes in arbitrary ways. So there have been arbitrary bans of people on Facebook who did absolutely nothing wrong, sometimes because they posted a link to an article about decentralized social networks. This has
Yeah.
happened to a prominent transhumanist called Lincoln Cannon. So a lot of people are thinking, well, now long existing social networks are not really as stable or reliable as people once posited. And so they're looking for alternatives. Now, with regard to a virtual reality infrastructure, if you have a virtual reality world, or you have the technological infrastructure maintained by a particular company, how easy would it be for a user to essentially disassociate themselves from that particular entity, that particular centralized decision maker? Is the technology compatible with multiple platforms, multiple types of worlds or experiences, so that if you don't like what Facebook is doing, and Facebook's behavior is very relevant in this space, then your headset would still be usable somewhere else?
So that's a great question, and it's actually a complicated situation. During the presentation, I mentioned some of the practices Facebook is using that are, I would say, not the best in my opinion. And if it was to go and discuss this, I can say that something very important that is happening is, again, the fact that Facebook is using kind of anti-competitive practices. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know exactly if we can even consider those practices anti-competitive. But if you look at, at a first sight from a common sense point of view, they're releasing, they're selling this headset at a $50 loss per headset. So those are serious billions of dollars in losses, right? But they're doing that so they can take market share from everyone else, right? So they kind of took the market share from Vive and from other headsets. And right now, after they did that and they've seen that it's working, right? They smoothly and not so smoothly actually try to do their thing, as in right now, in order to connect to Oculus Quest, I can't just sign up with an Oculus account. I need my Facebook account. So my Facebook account is connected to my Oculus account, and it automatically logs me in to my headset. And here you can imagine several issues that might come with this. But again, the first one, which is very obvious, is the fact that, yeah, if you post something on Facebook that Facebook doesn't like, you get blocked, you get whatever censored, your account gets deleted. Now you're not able to access your Oculus content. And maybe you've spent thousands of dollars, right, on 100 games or whatever, and right now you can't access it anymore because you said something wrong on Facebook. Another thing is the fact that I cannot connect more than one account to the same headset. So they're working on that as well. But this is all on purpose. Like, it's the software and the SDKs for Oculus. It's built in a way where they don't really encourage collaboration with other platforms. And I would say that VR kind of got from a place where everyone is trying to push the whole industry forward because we're small and we're trying to grow, all of us together before we compete with each other. It kind of got past that point, or is starting to get past that point. And we see, again, major players like Facebook that are trying to dominate and to monopolize the space. But that impacts users in a bad way, where, again, I wouldn't want to conclude anything here because Facebook is releasing updates fairly on a weekly, bi-weekly basis as far as what they're planning on doing to fix these issues. But currently, yes, there are several issues, and probably the communication between platforms is not the best. But again, this is all for a reason that impacts our industry, sometimes in a bad way from a user experience point of view, but it also grows the industry, for the price point and everything else. So it's a balance, right, between the two.
Yes, and it is quite concerning that if you post something on Facebook that gets your Facebook account banned, you could lose access to your Oculus account where you might have spent a lot of money purchasing games or other applications, or purchasing the device itself. And it does seem that there's a qualitative difference between Facebook saying, well, you can't use our free service anymore because you violated our terms of service, and it may be a spurious accusation, it may be unfortunate, but at least you didn't pay anything, you only spent your time to post content there. But if you actually pay money and then Facebook can unilaterally withdraw that service from you without explanation, without possibility of appeal, that is more troubling. That could be seen as a false promise that Facebook made when it sold you those goods. But along these lines, do you foresee an open source VR alternative emerging, similarly to how Linux, for instance, is an open source operating system that's an alternative to Windows or the Apple operating systems?
So there is a thing in VR, like in any other software, where you can jailbreak the software itself, right? And the initial founder, like the guy who created the first Oculus and sold it to Facebook, offered, I think, $5,000 to $10,000 to anyone in the world who's able to jailbreak the software, and somebody actually did it. So there is some movement, right, in those regards. Not in a legal way. I don't think this is, legal and allowed, but we all know, the hacker world and I would say computer science world. It's always, I think that people in general in that space are good and have good intentions, and they really want to, open source the things that are relevant. But I don't think that, as far as in an official way, I don't think that anything is going to come along for some time, because it's not only up to Facebook. It's actually more up to, and again, this might not be the most accurate thing I say right now, but I imagine it's more up to the developers of the game engines that are used to create those applications. So for example, Unity and Unreal are the two major players. So I create my app through Unity, and then I submit it to Facebook, and then I deal with them. So there are, SDKs like OpenXR that allows you to kind of build a game for one platform and then export a build for, Oculus, Vive headsets, because different headsets have different controllers, different interfaces. So there is something like OpenXR or OpenVR or VRTK that allows kind of a cross collaboration between these platforms. But I wouldn't say that any of those solutions are currently very stable, and I might be wrong, because I'm not a technical person. I'm not a developer here, but I would assume that a lot of it actually has to do with the game engine itself, rather than Facebook.
Mhm. Yes, so it's possible to design games for multiple platforms right
Yeah.
now, and that provides a bit of robustness. But of course, from a user perspective, it helps the user if the user has multiple headsets for multiple platforms.
Yeah.
And in that case, one would have to spend more money, but perhaps that's some security if one of the platforms decides to arbitrarily block access.
Yeah.
Now, Jason Geringer asks, can you explain the difference between the Oculus Go 3-point system and the other 6-point systems? Would you recommend paying the extra money to get a 6-point system instead of a 3-point system?
So what he's referring to is actually the degrees of freedom. 3DOF, 3 degrees of freedom, means that I put the headset on and I can look around, but if I move in the physical space, I'm not moving inside VR. That's really 3DOF, 3 degrees of freedom. And the Oculus Go headset that he's mentioning, it's actually an older headset that came out before the first Quest, which is worth mentioning. It was more of a multimedia headset where it's more for movies and smooth, easy games, I would say. So it's not that interactive. And again, the 3DOF, it means that you can only move your head, and inside VR. But in 6DOF, which again, the Quest 2 does it, and the Quest 1 also, you can move physically in the VR space, and your motion is getting tracked. And that's pretty much the main difference between the 3DOF and 6DOF.
All right, thank you. And he also asks a more practical question. Is there a good trick to keep the screen from fogging up? He says he tried Rain-X, but it didn't work.
Well, it depends on what you're doing. It's hard, I would say, to keep it from fogging up, especially if you're doing a workout game or a workout application where you move a lot. Also, if somebody wears glasses, that's also probably worth keeping in mind, that you need to use your extra device that comes with the headset, that extra plastic cover that you have to add on to the headset if you're using it with your glasses. But other than that, I don't know of any good solutions either. I don't think there is one yet.
Now, speaking of workouts, particularly intense workouts, do you think it's feasible right now to, for instance, do a long distance run in VR and run through a simulated environment using, say, an omnidirectional treadmill and have it feel like a real run?
Yeah, so with a treadmill, I think it's possible and it would be amazing. I haven't seen that solution yet, but I've seen one with a bike where a person gets on the bike and it kind of cycles for a in VR. But there are apps, even without any extra devices, just with a headset that you can get. For example, the one that I'm doing almost on a daily basis, it's Supernatural. Supernatural, it's an amazing fitness VR app where you can teleport yourself in different scenic places around the world. The website, it's getsupernatural.com, by the way. And you're pretty much immersed in different exercise scenarios. But the good part about VR is the analytics, is the fact that we can track everything at every single point during the workout or during the time where you're in the app. So I know exactly where you move, how you move, if you sit, if you stand up, if you look around. So I can track those analytics, and I can improve the workout based on those, and I can also track your calories. I can also track different body movement. This comes with real coaches that are training you, that are walking you through each, I would say, workout. And yeah, Supernatural is probably the best one I found so far for fitness.
Excellent. Well, hopefully this will help a lot of people to maintain good physical fitness and health despite the pandemic and the restrictions sometimes on what activities people can perform. Now, I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to run outdoors without encountering that many people, but I know people who live in denser urban environments may not have that ability. So being able to exercise indoors, do varied workouts, get good metrics on one's performance is quite valuable. Now, I would like to proceed with the panelists and seeing if they have any questions for you, Sever, before we get into some of the ethical areas, though if anybody has some of these ethical questions or questions about future possible uses and striking the proper balance in those uses, feel free to ask those as well. But does anyone on the panel want to ask Sever a question directly?
I want to motion capture my dancing, and I've not found that affordable yet. Some university came up with a way to put a bunch of cheap light sensors around. That doesn't seem practical on the go. I don't really know how to approach this, and I'm hoping my next stimulus check will get me in the door somehow. What would you recommend?
So I actually just looked up some motion capture suits recently, and they're still in the thousands. I would say 2,000 at least. I don't know of a cheaper solution than that. It really depends on where you're looking to do. You're looking just to record with motion capture and then kind of turn it into a 3D character or something? Or?
Yes, I want to be an avatar dancer. That's what everybody goes on about tomorrow, how I dance. I say, well, let's capture it.
Yeah. So yeah, the suits are still pretty expensive. What I can recommend, but again, this is a solution for VR. There is a company called Live, L-I-V, TV. So the website is liv.tv, and what they're doing, they are doing real-time it's kind of a projection where you only need your phone to record yourself, and the software kind of teleports you into the virtual game that you're playing. So if you're in VR and you want to record yourself, right, other than just recording yourself regularly with a phone and having just a person with a headset on, in the background, you can actually put what you're seeing on the headset. So it's kind of a mixed reality tool where the consumers, the users, can see what you're doing in VR in real time, but you are in VR, in the scene in real time. And you don't need a motion capture suit for this. And the software automatically turns your body into an avatar. So again, I'm not too sure if it works with applications that are not VR, and I'm not so sure how that works, but that's the closest I can think of that's free and doesn't require even a motion capture suit. So yeah, liv.tv.
All right, thank you, Sever. Any further questions or comments from the panel? Let's see. So I do want to address what I think will be a key question with regard to virtual reality. And to some extent, we've seen this play out with social media and to a lesser extent with computer games. And thus far, I would say computer games haven't really changed the fabric of society in the sense of distracting that many people away from what needs to be done in everyday life to maintain the physical world. Generally speaking, apart from a few exceptions, the occasional video game addict, most people know how to strike that balance. With social media, it's more difficult because, especially in a time of physical distancing, social media have become among the primary methods of communication among people, and the formats and the differences of those formats from the way people interact with the physical world have actually led to more toxicity and sometimes less civil behavior than we would see in person or with interactions that use more of the senses. And with virtual reality, I can see so many different applications. You could use virtual reality to improve health and fitness, or to arrange the kinds of meetings that you would have had, say, in a real world business setting or a social setting, have conversations like these. All of these are very productive uses. On the other hand, you did bring up the Ready Player One scenario where a fully immersive virtual world starts looking more attractive than the basic physical world.
Yeah.
And yet, one does need a certain degree of infrastructure within the base physical world in order to even be able to reliably experience virtual reality. If you have the electricity systems becoming unreliable, if you have unreliable internet access, if your physical environment starts being so filled with trash, for instance, that if you move around, you might not notice some object, you trip over it, and there goes your virtual reality experience. So how, at the very least, would you suggest that people approach virtual reality so that the physical world continues functioning smoothly enough to give people the quality of life that they're ultimately after?
Well, so far it's we're still far off, I would say, from the hardware itself inducing like an, I would say, unconscious addictive behavior where, you grab your phone, for example, with social media, like you were saying, you grab your phone and you check your Facebook or, email or YouTube or whatever I personally probably at least once per hour, a day. And it's out of reflex. It's kind of ingrained in us. It has so much limbic resonance with our, limbic system and our nature, right? As people, that it kind of got ingrained in us as part of our daily lives. Now for VR, it's still not the case. And to quote Jaron Lanier, who is one of the, I would say, most important people in VR and a great philosopher from here, from the Valley, he was saying that he's actually a proponent of, he's anti-social media. He actually hates social media. He wrote a book, Get Off Social Media. And he knows, because he's working on these technologies since their incipient stages, and he's working behind the scenes. And he made a great point. The reason I want to bring this up is because when sometimes you find yourself scrolling right on a social media network, and you're in like a zombie like trance, right? You're in like a state of, it's just autopilot. You don't even realize it. You just find yourself, I've been scrolling for the past 5 minutes and I haven't actually been looking at anything. But VR doesn't get you in that zombie like trance yet, at least, because you're still interacting with a new environment, with a new virtual world. So even if you want to spend, like I personally can't really spend more than 2 or 3 hours probably at the most. So at the present, time, it's, I would say, too early to worry about this, because we don't even know how it's going to come or how it's going to get us addicted. Because again, having this thing on your head for 8-10 hours, or how long does a obsessed person plays video games, on a regular screen, you can play, right, 10-12 hours probably. But having that headset on your head and playing VR games for 10 hours, it's just unfeasible. It's just, I would say, impossible for the current state of the technology. But in the future, I mean, is going to build so much resonance with our limbic system, probably, that it's hard to even predict where it's going to come from, where it's going to get us, I would say, addicted. But again, the analytics are very important, and the access of that the companies have to the data. You can imagine when Facebook kind of intertwines their data from the Facebook app, from the WhatsApp, from the Instagram, right? They have everything about you from every single point of view you can imagine. Then you add on top of that the data that you give them by using their VR devices. I mean, right now Facebook can differentiate a person out of 100 people just after 5 minutes they spent in VR. So if I spend this in this headset, if I spend 5 minutes, just based on my natural movements and the way I kind of uniquely interact with the headset, they're able to track me out of 100 or 1,000 users with very high accuracy. So who knows what they're going to use this data for and how they're going to take advantage of it in order to make us, addicted in a way or another. But yeah, it's kind of hard to predict right now.
Yes, and thank you for those astute observations. Yes, it does seem that we're going to have some time for essentially the norms of human behavior to adapt to this technology and figure out a way to work it into everyday life in a constructive manner. So Alexandria Black suggests maybe we can use VR as a tool to improve the real world so that people won't see it as an escape. And it's certainly possible to design virtual reality apps, augmented reality apps for those purposes. But the design of the system is quite essential. And this is where the role of Facebook does worry me a bit, because I remember essentially two distinct periods of my life in terms of interacting with technology. And I used to play a lot more computer games back in the day. And interestingly enough, I don't think I was less productive when I played more computer games. This was essentially leading up to about 2016. Mm-hmm. And after 2016, I haven't really had a lot of time to play computer games, apart from the occasional foray into Minecraft. But generally, I'm in Minecraft creative mode, and I have other activities that I'm performing at the same time, like listening to a podcast that's relevant to one of my interests, transhumanism in particular. So what I noticed was with games, that's an occasional time commitment, but you have a linear focus and you don't want to keep doing it all the time. You disengage after some time and move on to other activities. And your other activities prior to the age of social media dominance would have been those with linear focus as well. So if you sit down to read a book, if you go out for a run, just as examples, or if you write an essay, hopefully you're able to do that by devoting most or all of your attention to it. On the other hand, with social media, you're flooded with these distractions all the time, even if your goal is to communicate with this person or to spread this piece of information. You have 40 other pieces of information flying at you and other people demanding your attention. So that is an environment that actually saps productivity to a great extent, because people are not naturally good multitaskers, even though some people in the chat think I'm a good multitasker. In fact, I think those of us who appear that way are just trying our best, but we're not really, let's say, intuitively suited toward it. Nobody is. We may have learned some coping skills, but that's about the extent of human ability. So I think virtual reality environments may have different effects on human behavior and whether or not they're constructive environments, based on whether they can stimulate this linear focus and the sense of flow that people sometimes enter into when they're most productive, or whether Facebook will try to kind of broaden the Facebook social media experience onto virtual reality so that you have 5 chat messages popping up in front of you as you try to explore this VR world. What do you think is going to be a more likely outcome there, especially given some of the players involved in this space?
So right now, when we look at the way any technology company works and the way you develop a product, you usually want to launch something out, right, just to kind of get that initial feedback, and then you improve the product based on user feedback, more or less. And with the huge data, I mean, with the huge pool of data that Facebook has access to, and everything they're working on, it's still sometimes a hit or miss, right, with what you launch, especially when Facebook, being a software company, a social media company, that has nothing to do with hardware, for example, or it didn't, at least until they took over Oculus. I think they've done actually a pretty good job at launching something that's great and that improves pretty fast. But what worries me, it's the fact that right now they're not just going to have access to, again, what you do on the computer screen or whatever. They're going to know exactly. I mean, some people go with these headsets to sleep, right? Some people go to sleep with their friend from around the world. They're saying, let's sleep together in VR, in a social VR game. Some people just, that's how they go to sleep. Or some people that they use it on a regular daily basis. What worries me is the amount of I would say intuitive impulses from us as humans you can gather from the analytics of this technology. As I said, it's fairly easy. And me looking at this from the back end also, when I see what we can gather from our users, it's you can use it in ethical way or an unethical way, right? But that's also a discussion of, okay, what's ethical and what's unethical, because you have responsibilities to your shareholders to grow the company, to kind of push the product at all costs, and then you see the impact you had. It's probably not a beautiful picture, right? After you realize that, oh, you did kind of move too fast and you took advantage of those specific data sets that allow you to. But I still want to kind of keep myself impartial, because I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, something needs to happen in the space. Either another company or somebody to come out with a revolutionary product for a good price. That's the only way we're gonna have a choice between Facebook and others. But the way I'm seeing things currently, Facebook is far ahead of everyone else, like way ahead. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to predict.
Yes, and it is, of course, interesting to consider what will Facebook do with its dominance. Will it attempt to replicate the social media ecosystem, or will it focus more on the linear types of games or other applications? Of course, you could have a fully immersive game world that becomes a community as well. Think of Second Life.
They're actually working on one. And they're working on Facebook Horizon, and they're still waiting to launch. I don't know. They're still in beta for more than a year, but Facebook has access to all the games that are available and to all the data, and they can really take all the data from everyone that ever released a game on their platform, and they can copy everything and do it better. So that's why they kind of taking their time right now with their main platform, Facebook Horizon, who's supposed to be a version of the Facebook in virtual reality, where you can build your own places, you can build your own worlds, you can invite other people, you can do different things. But again, it's not live yet. It's only for early access users, but I'm sure they're planning on doing something like Ready Player One. And it's not just them that are planning that.
I would really quite enjoy the opportunity to build my own world. And indeed,
Yeah.
there are applications for the virtual enlightenment salons there, but I would want to be able to rely on whatever platform I build that world in to give me continued access to it, and perhaps even recognize a property right to my own creations, so that no matter what happens to my presence on that platform, I'll still have the ability to use them and deploy them as I see fit.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Horizon will allow that. That's a huge undertaking, I would say, from a technology point of view, just to make sure everything works properly. Also, on the networking side of the technology, there still needs to be some more improvements, I would say, because, for example, you can't host a room with, call it, hundreds of people, that won't crash and it would work properly, no lag. It would make sure that everyone sees each other in real time and they don't experience any bugs from that point of view. And that's also, a hard technical issue, because you're limited by, so these untethered headsets, they really run on a mobile Android kind of approach, where they have a Snapdragon chip inside of them, and it's really like a mobile platform. So you can imagine the difference between playing a game on your computer and what you can do there compared to playing it on your phone. Now, the more technology evolves from that point of view, also the better is going to get. But back to what you were saying, yeah, that's actually available right now for being able to host things and to actually build worlds. But I would say that it's still probably targeted for people that have played with Unity before, or that know what they're doing from that point of view. Which again, for me, it's as being a non-technical person, it's hard to learn it, on the spot. But Horizon, again, from Facebook, they're launching something that I think is going to be very easy to build worlds and to do everything, I would say on the spot, easier, without having any prior knowledge.
Yes, I think Facebook is very skilled at designing user interfaces that are intuitive for people, if that's what Facebook wants. If Facebook wants you to scroll through 15 unrelated things before you see the option that you actually want to click on, that's what it will also do. But when it does so, that is intentional on Facebook's part. Facebook can also make something very accessible and convenient if it so chooses. Now, Art Ramon, I was interested that you had shared this link from a site called Reallusion, which seems to be a blend of reality and illusion. So what is this about?
I think they took over the old Microsoft product that was the Kinect, and that had the ability to track your full body motion. And I remember researchers using that product for possibly sign language capture. And I learned sign language back in 2013. So I was sort of interested in sign language capture as using that for an interface in VR space rather than typing with your fingers. But yeah, that was a link that I wanted to show Alexandria to see if they're still making a product. I don't know. But I know from my experience using VR, I have an Oculus Rift S, and I've used it to create some animations using Oculus Quill. And
Quill, yeah.
It's interesting, but it gets a little cumbersome the more complicated you get with it, using the timeline and trying to make nested animations, and it gets a little cumbersome. So I haven't done as much animation. My killer app for it has been Pavlov VR. And to me, that's like almost real world training for guerrilla warfare. And I've been using that for a while. It's a first person shooter. It's almost like 3D Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And you go in there, and you feel like you are the character. You use your parts of your mind that are like for 3D mapping, and that seems to be like your real functioning 3D mapping and object tracking. And yeah, one thing I see little kids in there playing, like 5 or 6, 8 years old, and they're in Pavlov VR learning guerrilla warfare tactics. And I see where the Army is probably going to pick up on this, like their old Army game, and start to recruit these little kids who have learned guerrilla warfare tactics since they were, 6, and probably funnel them into some sort of super soldier program. So yeah, that's been my experience. But Pavlov VR, great game. They recently came out with a World War II update, and
Yeah.
really great update. Though it seems like the online groups or channels that you can go in and play with other people have sort of shrunk until people actually get to the update. But yeah, I definitely love VR. So far, like I said, Pavlov VR is my killer app right now.
Yeah, that's actually a great one. And as you may know, you have just a Rift S, right now. You don't have a untethered headset. So for the people that, have untethered headsets or that want to check out Pavlov, you're not going to be able to find it on the official Oculus store. You're going to have to go on SideQuest. This is just a side note here. And yeah, Pavlov is actually one of the best VR games out there. And again, this is all done by an indie developer, by a guy who probably didn't get to agree on the terms to sell it on the official store. So he's selling it independently on Steam, which I assume, Roman, that's how you got it from. That's how you got your Pavlov, through Steam. And you can also find it on SideQuest VR. Yeah.
All right. So it's interesting too that in the YouTube chat, a lot of people are referencing prior works of writing or media that had some anticipation of these technologies. Daniel Twett quotes Philip K. Dick from 1977 when he wrote an essay called "If You Find This World Bad, You Should See Some of the Others." And Philip K. Dick wrote, this is from Daniel, "Since at the resolution of every encounter of thesis and antithesis between the dark counterplayer and the divine programmer, a new synthesis is struck off. And since it is possible that each time this happens, a lateral world may be generated, and since I conceive that each synthesis or resolution is to some degree a victory by the programmer," I think he's referring to the ability to create new worlds in VR, new types of experiences, some good, some perhaps not so good, that you alluded to. I do think it depends on the people involved, just as with all of the other interactions. If you have somebody
Exactly.
who is a bully or a troll, that's going to be reflected on social media, that's going to be reflected in computer game worlds. If you have somebody who is more decent and civilized and constructive, that's the interaction you're going to have. Do you think anything fundamentally changes in a virtual reality setting compared to what we've seen already in online interactions? Or do you think essentially it's just a different realm for the same dynamics to play out?
Well, it does change in a huge way, and it really depends on the person, and the level of sensibility, I would say, of a person. Some people have, tougher skin towards this, online bullies or trolls, but you can imagine that on a computer, I'm using my mouse and my keyboard to kind of interact with the people. I see the people on screen. If another player comes next to me and does something abusive or whatever, it's pretty much out there, right? So I can ignore it or whatever. But when I'm in VR, somebody can actually get right in my face. Somebody can invade my personal space. And when I'm immersed in there, again, the body doesn't know the difference. So if in the real world, we all have kind of a personal space, for example, as a one specific example. And when somebody kind of invades that, for some people it's larger, or, for some people it's smaller space. But when somebody invades that, we kind of get a chemical reaction in our body. I mean, we feel something, some level of anxiety. Now imagine in VR, it's really the same thing, right? A person can come very close to you and they can, be abusive or whatnot, or they can do different things to you. And that's really different than it works in a non-VR game, because the immersiveness is very high. And I personally, I'm just going to make a quick reference that's probably relevant, which is more related to more scientific data right now. I've done a project where we were doing exposure therapy for people that suffer from social anxiety. So people that struggle with exactly this particular component of, getting close to people, building new connections, or starting a new conversation, or, it's a large spectrum, anywhere from, again, pure isolation to a person that's scared of public speaking. So we were immersing these people in virtual scenarios in order to expose them and to trigger that anxiety, that feeling, for them to be able to overcome it. But what was reported, one interesting fact is the idea that the users were feeling weird because you can't read the body language of another avatar. So in the real world, we're talking, right? Maybe someone that's in sales, but might be even more, I would say, paying even more attention to this. But when you're talking to someone, whether you're selling something or not, you're usually paying attention to the body language of the person, and more on a subconscious level, your body kind of reacts to their body language, right? So if somebody, changes their body position to a threatening one, you're going to more likely change yours as well. But in VR, we can't really read that. We can't really determine that, since we don't have full body capture yet, right? So these patients that are diagnosed with social anxiety were saying that it's triggering even more of their social anxiety, because right now they are kind of assuming what the other person is thinking, because they cannot read the body language, or they're kind of, it can get confusing, and a lot of assumptions and a lot of subjective thoughts can come into play. But I would say that, the immersiveness level can really have a huge impact compared to, other mediums that are not, where you don't embody the character that you're playing.
Yes, and that can give rise to a number of scenarios. For instance, somebody could have an avatar that is a robot that completely does not display any emotions. So if you're there in this fully immersive environment, the other person projects as a robot, and whatever you say or do to the robot will just stand there, maybe do a few robotic motions so you don't know. Now, I'm the kind of person who would just be able to talk to the robot and convey abstract ideas. And if the robot doesn't attack me, I'm fine with it being the way it is. But I know not everybody is that way. And the people with social anxiety issues are probably going to be disconcerted by that, or projecting a certain state of mind onto the person behind the robot than that person might actually have.
Yeah, it's a good. I would recommend, again, not on a clinical level, but as an idea, if a person is, I would say, shy, or they think they struggle maybe with getting out there right in front of people and talking to them, VR is a great place to exercise those skills, because it's, so immersive, and when you embody that avatar, it actually feels like the real world. So I don't want to tell the people that are going to look for something like this that is going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for you to get out there and kind of, if you're not an ongoing extroverted person in the real world, you're probably not going to be one in the virtual world, either. But it's worth trying as a first step, so you can get used to that level of, maybe talking in front of 5 people, maybe, talking to 2-3 new people a day that you don't know. because it's a good practice for the real world. If anybody wants to overcome those kind of, character traits, or what I can even call them.
Mhm. Yes, indeed. And it is good to have a training ground of sorts for these kinds of experiences if people believe they need to develop certain skills or overcome certain fears. Now, Jason Geringer says that he thinks trolling in VR will be worse than it is right now. And some of your comments have highlighted that. Now, Jason, do you want to expand upon why you think this?
Yeah, a while back during one of our salons, I was streaming the salon into an app called Big Screen that I got from Steam. And this guy hacked in there and hacked the screen and put some stuff up there that you just can't unsee. And it was way worse than just seeing some meme on Facebook. So yeah, and it kind of worries me because there's no moderation. I mean, they're all them rooms or whatever that you make in Big Screen, there's no moderators there. There's little kids going in there, and that kind of worries me.
So that is an important issue, and I personally, actually, I am involved in a project that wants to address this. I can't speak too much about it right now, but for me, that's probably one of the most important issues in VR, because we know how, gamers can get crazy and, act in a way that's very antisocial and, as you say, traumatizing. I mean, some people can share some maybe racial stuff or gore, images, or something that, again, you can't really unsee. And when they can project it in a way where it's right in front of you. And on the security side, it's hackers are always going to be present, right, in any software, any game. So on the security side, I think there's definitely a lot more they can improve, and us as a whole space, so we can improve the cybersecurity component for hackers to not be able to do that. But the trolling issue itself, like without the hacking, I think that it's getting worse. And I think that if we're looking at kind of the zeitgeist, right, of where the world is going, if we're looking at, younger Generation Z, maybe, I mean, these younger individuals are not, I would say they're way more reluctant, or they're way more against bullying, and they way more conscious about the, mental health component of cyberbullying and issues like that. So what I think is that each game is going to have its own culture. So there are going to be games where you step in and that, okay, so this is right now the time for roasting, or, it's time for just, having irrelevant conversations and making jokes. But this is another game where, if we go in here, we know that people here are more serious, they want to talk more, maybe have more meaningful conversations. Maybe then they don't tolerate that kind of behavior in this app. So I think it's going to be probably specifically tailored to the culture of each app itself, like we currently see with the regular games. But yeah, the trolling issue is an important one, and it's not easy to work on it, because you also have to keep in mind, the freedom of speech component. So it's really like a fine line between what are we going to let these people do and what aren't we going to let them do. We also look at Facebook right now, and big social media platforms where they're getting criticized for banning certain content and whatnot. So it's always going to be a fine line, and it's not going to be easy. But again, we're working on something in those regards, and I hope that we're able to solve it to a certain extent and get there faster to at least engineer, or I would say organize an atmosphere in at least one game, or at least for people to have one choice at least in the whole library of games where they can go and find, okay, so this is a place where bullying is not tolerated, trolling is not tolerated. And yeah, I think it's going to be specifically tailored to the culture of each game.
Mm-hmm. And the design of some of the user options could play into that. For instance, let's say in a virtual reality world, a user has the ability to deploy a force field around their avatar. And automatically, if you deploy that force field, you are kept a certain distance away from all of the other avatars, so nobody can come in your face.
They have those already in some.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And of course, on social media, you could block people, and perhaps in virtual worlds, a similar ability could exist.
You can block them, yeah, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Of course, some of the issues can arise if somebody does something about you or relevant to you while they're still being blocked, like spreading false information, and there's not an easy solution to that problem. Of course, unlike in the physical world, police in the virtual world could exist and be more efficacious in the sense that you could have some sort of global moderator of the world that chooses how to address certain behaviors. But that again relies on the integrity of that moderator and the culture of that system or that space. Is it an algorithmic moderator like Facebook, which is going to make mistakes, or are they human moderators, some of whom will be good, some of whom will be not so good? There are certain Facebook groups, for instance, where toxicity is the norm because of the people moderating them. So all of these questions continue to be relevant, and I think institutions and cultural norms of behavior are key in effectively addressing them.
Yeah.
Now, Alexandria asks, might it be possible to have AI watch for patterns of bad behavior and keep such bad actors out of a wider community in VR? But I will also add to that question, what are some ways to avoid algorithmic false positives, as has been happening with Facebook recently?
Yeah, well, again, there's that fine line between what are we censoring, what are we keeping as free speech. And I'm sure it's possible to have an AI that watches for patterns of bad behavior. And as far as the technology to implement that, it's fairly easy. I mean, you can grab a Google speech to text component, then you grab an IBM Watson or some kind of AI for sentences, and whatever data input goes into the AI, you can select certain terms that might be censored or blocked, or either use that to ban certain people. But first of all, it's a question of how accurate the technology is. I'm not so sure it's that accurate yet, as far as doing a great job, like you were saying. It's probably, AI is probably going to mess up things even more at this point. I'm not so sure. But, again, to keep bad actors out of a wider community, again, that's also relative, right? Because, again, like you were saying, for some games or some groups, that's just the norm. So when you have a lot of bad actors around other bad actors, they're not bad actors to each other. That's just how the culture is. But I think that keeping them away, it's easier if you have a core base of users that are willing to, not put up with the extra bad behaviors of these bad actors. But in order for a moderator, I would say, or to hire a full team of moderators in order to keep an eye out for these people, I mean, that's feasible, to a certain extent. But after you get 10,000 users, 20,000 users, 1 million users, how are you going to keep your eye out for all those people? It's almost impossible. So the community, it's really moderating itself based on the core philosophy of the application, or whatever the user experience is.
Yes, indeed. And it is important to note in almost every online community and in many in-person communities, much of the order or the set of norms come from within. Even in day-to-day interactions, the reason why there isn't that much crime is not because there are laws and police that protect people against crime. It's because most people don't want to commit crime, and they're either quite averse to it, or the thought doesn't even enter their minds. If even 1% of people in society were actively trying to commit crimes all the time, we would not have a stable society. The police would not be able to get to all of them. However, some human involvement at some level is necessary. Alexandria points out we need moderators to monitor algorithm behavior and handle appeals, because right now the problem with Facebook's bans is there is no real way to contact a person or go through an appeals process. And there could be a kind of pyramid of moderators where there's an initial layer of fairly basic appeals that a large team could handle very quickly. But there could be very sophisticated situations that might require somebody to scroll through people's comments for an hour and determine what was actually happening. And yes, that seems to be a lot of time to be spent on particular instances, especially when you have millions of users. However, it has been my experience that sometimes going in surgically to address a particular situation that seems to be the exception to the norm of how a system operates and may have some nuances, actually greatly improves the smoothness of the entire system's functioning. Because if you have this one anomalous situation and you let it get out of control and there's some sort of obvious injustice and people see the obvious injustice, it becomes a scandal. It can greatly undermine your reputation. That's what happens with a lot of companies, for instance, that follow routine processes that work well most of the time, but they fail to address those occasional exceptions or nuances. If you address it in a way that the people involved consider fair, then you've solved the problem, nothing bad happens. Of course, nobody sees outside of the people involved that you've actually done that. So a lot of executives think there's not much of a value proposition. The value proposition is you avoid the huge scandal and the blow to your reputation that will result if you don't handle it. And that's when, as a company, you could lose millions of dollars if somebody sues and wins. So indeed, very interesting issues. Now, I would like to also pose a question that was raised by Daniel Twett. Does VR bring about unusual challenges for digital rights management? And we touched on that a bit. So what if you build something in a VR world hosted by somebody else? Can you have a ready way to maintain the rights to your creation?
So if you create a virtual world for someone else to host an event in, or?
So it could be anything. It could be like a work of art or an object that's used in a virtual world. Think of, say, objects in Second Life. Sometimes there were real world transactions, financial transactions associated with those. Game maps is another example that Art Ramon poses.
Right. So I'm not so sure on the legal side how it works. If you have rights to, like a copyright or something to your creation. I'm not so sure how that translates into the real world in a way or another. So yeah, I don't think I can answer this properly.
Yes, perhaps this will be one of the issues, though, to consider as virtual worlds become more common and more people contribute their own creations to them. Now, Daniel also asks, have there been any documented cases of PTSD from VR, like if somebody saw a troll or the equivalent of a Zoom bombing in VR?
Not that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there might be some people that got scared, maybe during a VR experience or something like that. There are some experiences that are pretty intense. And I like to use those as demos for the people that want to kind of get the full, experience of VR. I personally don't know of any game or anything that might be traumatizing, but again, different people react in different ways. And I know that VR has helped with PTSD actually. And Albert Skip Rizzo worked on some PTSD patients from Iraq, I think, some soldiers that came back, and they work at UCLA, if I'm not mistaken. Also, one of my advisors that I worked with on a project, Joanne Dafidi, she worked with the victims from 9/11, even back then with the early, VR devices. They were helping those people overcome the PTSD, through exposure therapy. But yeah, the other way around, I'm not sure if there are any documented cases.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for that answer. And yes, I can see how VR can help people deal with traumatic experiences from other sources. Gabriel So asks, are there any great VR or AR mobile apps for public presentation and communication in an iPhone that you can recommend?
Well, there are where you can practice presentations, or if that's the case, then yeah, I would look up. Let me think. Let's see if these guys are still doing this. So there was a company called Panic Lobster, actually, and they were doing a presentation VR kind of recorder. I'm looking up right now on their website, but so paniclobster.com. They're doing, engaging presentations where you can practice in VR in front of an audience. And you can, insert your PDF or whatever file you have. You can go to the recording in front of an audience, kind of a, simulated virtual audience, and you can practice. But like if you want to do this with real people in real time, again, the most popular one I know of is engagevr.io. And you can share, presentations, documents with real people with, you can come up with different 3D objects. If you want to include in your presentation, you can have different settings. And right now I'm actually looking at their website, engagevr.io. You can see, realistic avatars, and presentations can be in an auditorium or different real life simulated scenarios.
Yes, thank you. And Mike Lazine suggests that in the future, with regard to assets in virtual reality, the system should be set up like DeviantArt, which is a website where a lot of artists upload their creations, where people can keep their intellectual property and upload it anywhere without DeviantArt claiming any exclusive rights or saying you can't upload it anywhere else. I would generally support a system that allows non-exclusive distribution. I would be very reluctant to give exclusive rights to anyone but myself to my work, because that would deprive me of the ability to use it in the future. But go ahead.
No, I was saying that I'm not too sure if any of the apps are currently, addressing that. I wanted to ask Ramon, when you played Quill, have you seen anything like that after you create your artwork or after you develop your creation?
You can share
Do
it.
they bring any?
Yeah, you can share the artwork you create through Quill, through the Quill interface, and there's like a gallery for other artists, and you can go through other creations by people who have uploaded their work. But I don't know what happens if someone steals it. I don't know. They're not going to have the file, but they could maybe pick elements from it. But yeah.
All right. So the next question comes from Alexandru Zernovianu, who says he is a big fan of your work, Sever, and he asks, in what year do you think VR worlds will be indistinguishable from the real world?
Well, I wish I had an accurate prediction. To be honest, I don't know. If we're looking at the rate of growth, um, who knows? 10, 20 years? The rate of growth looks pretty good, but there are other factors, to consider. Probably even when technology gets there, it's one thing for the technology to get there, but it's another thing for the technology to get there and be affordable and accessible to everyone. So, probably the technology gets there in the, next 10, 15 years. But as far as of an accessible technology to everyone, that everyone can purchase, I don't know. I'm bad at predictions, but I would say at least 20, probably 20 years.
So for the time being, we will have a lot more ability to access virtual worlds, but we're clearly going to know we're in a virtual world, and it will be a different experience from the physical world. So we're going to perhaps want to have those experiences some of the time, but also return to the physical world and do what we need to do there.
So I think it's gonna be a platform change. How right now we're kind of changed from PC to mobile. Right now from mobile is going to turn into AR maybe, and the stuff that you do in the privacy of your home are going to turn into VR. So right now the next computation platform, which is kind of obvious, it's going to be again wearables, whether AR or VR. And I think that in order to get very real, indistinguishable from reality, we have to get to a point where we can do it. We can do it through BCIs, like send the signal directly to the brain. So I'm not too sure when that platform, computing platform, is going to become mainstream. The BCI, even VR and AR, is still early. So I would follow closely the space for the next 5-10 years to see, what it develops as far as the, non-BCI kind of hardware. But then when, BCIs come more accessible and available, I would assume that VR is going to be part of that.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on BCI technology a bit in your presentation. You gave an example of a headset which is non-invasive, and I think a good BCI would have to be non-invasive in order for people to have a mass interest in it. Even a lot of transhumanists who have commented on this technology, for instance, with regard to the Neuralink, have said, well, they certainly wouldn't want holes drilled into their skulls unless it could save their lives, for example, but certainly not just as a method of enhancing some sensory or intellectual function, because the risks of that procedure are still too great. But what can a non-invasive BCI do today, and what do you think it will be able to do in the coming years?
So I don't really know. I assume there's a huge difference, right, going inside the brain compared to non-invasive. So I don't think non-invasive is actually very accurate, right? I think someone was saying that it's like listening to the wall of a factory, but you can't really get inside. You're trying to get the signals from there. So I'm not very versed, I would say, in BCIs and how they work and what helps and what improves, the experience. But I would say that, of course, non-invasive is the way, at least from a probably first adoption point of view. And Facebook is actually working on something as well. There was a leaked email about a BCI from Facebook that's non-invasive. I'm not too sure if they were still working on it, but yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see.
So Alexandria, you have a headset here that you're showing us. Is this a BCI?
This is Open BCI. It's not been working in a while, or I couldn't get it connected with anything since that Surface was stolen in Berlin, and it might have been on too many airplanes. But I need to get this thing fixed. But the question is, have you thought of using an open source platform like Open BCI to piggyback on?
Yeah, so the good thing about Open BCI is that you can currently kind of work with it and integrate it with Unity, but an important update is the fact that OpenBCI is actually working on Galia, which is a new device that's specifically made for virtual reality. So I'm really excited about that one. I would wait until that comes out and order it. But yeah, if you look up OpenBCI, GALEA, Galia, that's something that's actually customized, especially for VR. And yeah, it's from the same company.
So this is interesting. Daniel Twet says humans have a 100% positive track record when it comes to weaponizing new tech. But in virtual reality, this may have interesting implications. Do you think it might be possible for someday for wars, for instance, to be waged in virtual reality and for people to decide, well, we don't actually need to kill people from the other side. Let's stage some massive virtual reality battle and agree if it's a war between two countries, whichever country wins this battle, it will get concessions from the other country. So you don't actually have to invade. And if you invade, you destroy a lot of the infrastructure. But if you have the VR war, then the infrastructure will stay intact and you can just settle things that way. And the winner might actually benefit to a greater extent.
I don't think that's going to ever be the case, at least from a gaming perspective, where you have two countries fighting in a game rather than in the real world. Probably, the closest we're going to get to that is going to be some kind of cybersecurity war, right, between companies, or countries, right, depending on how we're going to use virtual reality. But I don't think that an actual feasible war where you can simulate yourself as a soldier and you can actually grab weapons and play a game, and this to actually have impact in the real world, I think that's unfeasible. I think the closest we'll get to that, it's again some hackers just typing stuff on their keyboard and coding and finding exploits into a system rather than the actual simulation of a war.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting, and yeah, it has no impact on the real world. So if I could choose, I would choose that. Yeah, I would rather have those kind of wars.
Yes, absolutely. And the key is, how do we convince humans that that's a worthwhile path to pursue? Mike Lezine thinks it would be hard to do and would take UN involvement. Jason Geringer points out that there was a Star Trek episode like that. I think that was in the original Star Trek series, but the unfortunate drawback was that they were simulating nuclear war and actually making the casualties of that real, but they didn't have the destruction of cities and other infrastructure that would typically accompany a nuclear war. And Captain Kirk put an end to that practice when he visited that planet. Alexandria suggests, can we just stop letting cortisol and greed decide things? Well, that would be ideal, but I wonder, in your view, Sever, could virtual reality environments help people become more humane, be motivated by other considerations, or will they just be essentially projections of human desires, human tendencies as they are right now?
Well, like any technology is just a tool, right, that we can use in any way we want. But historically, the technologies that achieve the most limbic resonance to our, I would say, human nature, they usually win, right? And human nature, it's dark, and also it has a bright side, and it really depends on what the purpose of the technology is, right? Now, I assume that it's going to be, VR games where people are going to only go and, I don't know, for maybe sexual activities, or maybe for I would say environments of that nature, right? More on the on those particular innate drives, right, of the human nature. But I don't think we can generalize, the technology as something that triggers that. I think that it's just a tool, and we're just kind of showcasing our human nature through the tool that we are using. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As far as just one quick note, since you asked me, I think this is relevant. a lot of people were using VR for empathy training. Like, for example, they were putting yourself in the body of, I don't know, whatever the situation was. In the situation was a black child growing up, in a tough neighborhood. Or another situation, there were some coworkers and there was a woman that was, I think, part of the LGBTQ community. And then three colleagues were coming to you. You were embodying that woman, and they were telling you three different things to your recent promotion at work. Like, one of them was saying, "Oh, you only got the promotion because they need to check the boxes for minority and LGBTQ." Another person was saying that you really deserve this. You really worked hard for this, and so you were kind of getting trained on how certain people, certain groups experience the world. And it's, I would say, pretty impactful, right, from an empathy point of view. And at the same time, it could make an impact, right, in people's lives. But I don't know if that's going to be the primary use case for it, to be honest. I think that's more of is the right thing to do, is the noble thing to do, and this is important, but probably more in business settings, more in training settings. When you start a new job or something like that, it's worth going through those empathetic training sessions. But I'm not so sure who buys a new VR headset and it says, "Hey, the first thing I want to do is learn how to be empathetic towards a certain group of people." It would be good if that would be the case, but I doubt it.
Yes, probably the vast majority of uses early on will be either entertainment oriented or business oriented, if certain businesses are forward thinking enough to use this technology to, for instance, hold meetings or enhance worker productivity. But these additional uses, the improvements in empathy or help to people who are struggling in some aspect, they're going to be auxiliary. They may be made possible by the ecosystem that forms and the technologies that bring about the other uses as well. Now, Alexandru Zernoveanu also observes that, in his view, this will be one of the most regulated industries which will impede progress. Do you agree with him? And what level of regulation do you observe for VR technologies currently, and what level of regulation do you anticipate?
Well, as far as the gaming space is not that regulated, right? But we need to consider, the current regulations that are in place in general that might impact VR technology. Like, for example, HIPAA compliance. If you want to do a clinical product for mental health therapy, you need to take in consideration the fact that all the data has to be aggregate. We cannot have data with names on it. We cannot have a person's medical records, that are all confidential. Everything needs to be encrypted properly from a HIPAA compliance standard. And also, you have to think about, again, another regulation in mental health specifically is if a therapist wants to provide remote telehealth assistance, therapy to a patient, if they're not licensed in the same state with the patient, they can't really do it. So if I want to do remote VR therapy from Illinois to California or whatever, I won't be able to, that's strictly for mental health. For games and stuff like that, I don't think regulations are an issue at all. At the moment, but yeah, for other industries and especially mental health, there still are certain regulations that don't really let us move as fast as we would want.
So interestingly enough, it would be easier to design a game with entertainment as the ostensible motive, but it happens to, as a side effect, have some beneficial impacts on people's mental health. And you could even say in advertising this game, well, it's not intended to treat any condition, but you'll really enjoy it. And you might enjoy it in the following ways. And that could perhaps get around some of these barriers if one isn't making medical claims.
So I think that, that's the best approach. That's kind of the approach that we're taking with our project that we're working on. But at the same time, it's hard on the patient side to even, kind of look at it strictly from a mental health perspective, if it was to purchase the headset just for that, you're already paying so much money, right, per hour in therapy, because most therapists don't accept insurance. Then on top of that, you have to get another, device that's an extra, $300. Then you have to buy the software that's properly encrypted in order to, so I would say on the patient side, currently from that point of view, it's a lot of bottlenecks and, friction. But yeah, a lot of games actually have mental health benefits, and even though they're not specifically, marketed as such.
Yes, and that's great to know, I think, for many people who are interested in virtual reality and may be seeking these kinds of benefits as well, especially during a time of the pandemic, which has been stressful for a lot of people and has had adverse mental health effects on large segments of the population. Perhaps they could look into that as a way of improving their day-to-day experience of the world. So thank you for those remarks. And now we have come to the time in our virtual Enlightenment Salon where we will go around the panel and ask for any concluding questions or comments or observations. And then, as is our practice, we will let our guest have the final word. But first, let's go to Charlie Cam.
How about, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, Sever, thanks so much for this really informative presentation on VR. You really know the stuff better than anybody I've heard talk about it before, so I appreciate it a lot. I did see the movie Ready Player One, and when it gets to that level, I look forward to being able to do what they did in that show. Just to make a reference, there's another show, or there's a TV show called Upload, which actually it looks like you've nodding your head, you've seen that. So they actually touch on those same, the idea of uploading a mind and then living in a virtual world, and all the things you talked about. So that's like even more recent reference you could always all use. One of the things I wanted to mention was there's been talk in this discussion and beyond about the the idea of full immersion of virtual reality, where it would be indistinguishable from real reality. And Kurzweil tends to predict that happening sometime between the 2030s and 40. And when he talks about it a lot, he references nanobot technology, and that, nanobots would basically glom onto the neurons and block off all of the sensory input from your five senses. So you wouldn't even need any kind of, outside devices or, a treadmill of any of that sort. And, with regard to invasive technology, that's a word that again has to be clearly defined, because, the idea of putting holes into somebody's head sounds scary and invasive. Of course, I think a lot of people are going to do it if they find out that they can be a lot smarter. I'd do it, but invasive could also imply with something as simple as Kurzweil has mentioned, just swallowing nanobots.
Right.
And that's not, is that invasive? People take pills right now to alter their brain. They drink alcohol to alter their brain. So I think taking nanobots that can go and glom onto your neurons, that's how invasive, and what's the definition of invasive? So I look forward to all that coming, and I think there's going to be other things that have to be considered that are going to happen culturally, because if we are going to have nanobots or something like Neuralink happening, and since it's already started with Musk company and other ones, you're going to have a society that's going to be a lot smarter. We're going to have access to information, and we'll probably have analysis bots and everything else in our brain. So there will be substantial changes going on culturally. So, it's going to be interesting and fun to see how this all plays out, because I think the idea that we're just inherently terrible, that could change. People could be a lot more empathetic as they become smarter, where they have IQs of, 4 digits or something. It'll be different, and the world's going to change dramatically. And that's something that he talks about and other science people have talked about. So it's important not to look at this in a vacuum where it's just like, well, we're advancing this technology and we're still going to have these kinds of instincts. I think people, right now it's hard to see that because we see a lot of stuff going on in the world, but I do think there's a optimistic, positive outlook that could happen. So I just wanted to put that out there. But I really do want to thank you for what you did today. I thought it was great, and I look forward to hearing more of what you're doing.
Thanks a lot. Just 1 second. Seems like I'm losing battery. I just have to grab this charger. 30 seconds. Give me 1 second.
All right. Well, while Sever is doing that, yes, thank you, Charlie, for those remarks. And I do hope that in the future, technology will be able to reconfigure the incentives and constraints facing human beings in order to motivate the more rational, more civil, more empathetic sides of human behavior, and not so much the aggressive side or the tribal side. And I do think the only way to do it ultimately is through technology. It's just that certain technologies will be more suited to that than others, as well as certain designs of environments. You could have a virtual reality environment that facilitates this, and others that do not do so as much. Now, it's interesting that Brendan Clark points out in our chat, everyone in VR is on a level playing field. You can be anyone or anything and have many different types of avatars, so no one can judge you on anything except by the quality of your conversations. And yes, that's a possible way to instantiate oneself in VR. It used to be like that on the early internet as well, where most people would have either their own websites or they would post on message boards, but they wouldn't really have many associations with their real world identity. So they would be a username posting ideas and people would judge them on the quality of their ideas. Of course, you could have good uplifting types of communities and message boards, or you could have toxic ones even back in those days. But yes, there was more of a spirit of on the internet, you're judged by the quality of what you post or just the content of what you post and not who you are identity-wise. Now, let us go to Alexandria. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on this line of thinking that Charlie brought up about, well, I'll phrase it like this, that certain people are kept at a low information level so that their fears and biases can be exploited for political ends, which equates to financial ends. Okay. And also, I think I remembered it might have been Tim Berners-Lee that has a project now for data sovereignty, so that each person can have their own data suitcase and create their own license agreements for companies or whoever to use bits of those data and perhaps even pay for them.
Well, my name was invoked. I would say, what I was talking about, it really I'm referencing pretty far into the future, or not that far, but like maybe 10, 15 years. So I think when people do, and, with regard to low information people, I think everybody's going to have the access to that kind of non-invasive information to go to their brains and make them a lot smarter. So that may not even be a thing that can be constrained so easily anymore, because it's the economy of abundance that we talk about, and we talked about throughout the campaign last year. And so when those kinds of things become available to everyone, it'll be kind of hard to keep people
stupid on purpose. Yes, it does a lot to avoid idiocracy. Idiocracy is a weapon, It is a feature, not a bug, and we need to stop that by improving the mind.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We do need to improve the mind, and I do see some idiocracy type scenarios playing out in contemporary American society. Now, in the chat, Monty Graham says regulations being written by the restrictive / culture warrior crowd are going to be a major barrier to development and deployment of tech. Anyone focused on removing these blocks that we know of? So this goes again to the free speech issues, as well as how do we protect people who want to express beliefs that are different from perhaps what some people prefer, and yet are not inherently abusive or dangerous or threatening. So if someone just has a difference of opinion, there are some people who would want to silence that. Is there a way to build platforms that are able to honor people's rights of free speech while still keeping out the trolls and the really undesirable kinds of behaviors? What do you think, Sever?
Well, for the current social media solutions, I think that if there was a real way of doing that, probably Twitter and Facebook wouldn't be in so much, trouble currently. And I also, my personal point on these issues, I'm not trying to look towards the big corporations and point a finger and blame them, because at the same time, those companies grew so fast and they're so big and they have so much impact, to the point where right now it's probably unfeasible for them to even be able to control it in a proper way and to kind of make sure that everyone is satisfied with the product, right? And even if we look at the fact that most technology workers are on the liberal side of the political spectrum, and also we can see those influences within the products themselves, and again within the moderation of these platforms. I think this is too hard of a problem for even the people that are working on this on a daily basis, they still don't know what was there to be done. I think it's very hard even for them to figure out what's the right approach. So the way this translates into VR, it's really going to be probably the same, in a way or another, where people from different backgrounds that have a difference of opinion might be censored. And at the same time, you're also trying to keep the trolls away, so you won't really have to deal with that. But I just don't think this is an easy answer. It's such a complicated question, and problem, where I don't think we have enough data in VR yet for this, right? But assuming that the same companies run the VR space as well as the social media space, at least Facebook, we can probably predict or assume that they're going to handle it in a similar way as the main Facebook platform. And again, I'm not so sure what's the right approach for this. I don't think anybody knows currently.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
yeah.
What if we make them a pool where they would rather play than our pool? And while they're in that pool, we sneak some mental health in on them.
Well, I'm not so sure what you mean by pool, like an actual pool or like a pool of patients, a pool of people, or
a VR space where they would rather be. Pornhub doesn't want to be in our group. They're busy doing something else. That's an example.
Yeah. So there's actually a lot of activity in the adult space in VR as well, as you may imagine. There are a lot of successful companies in that space as well, where they adapt the videos to 3D, 360 VR experiences. But I don't think it has such a huge impact yet. It's probably still early for the data to come in, and it's so we're looking at the way this actually shapes the new generation, right? That's going to run the world in the next 10, 20 years. I'm very close with the young generation. I have a brother who's Generation Z. He's 16 years old, so he's right at the center of all of these. And just by asking him questions and by looking at his behavior, I think that the new generation, it's actually, I would say it's more focused on social issues than the previous generations were. They're more acceptant towards diversity, you know. They're also more aware of how you treat other people, compared to, you know, like, at least me, I was growing up, you know, build tough skin, and whatever somebody says to you, you know, don't worry about it, you know, you just do your own thing. But they're growing up in a different culture right now, in a way different one. And VR is also shaping their experience in the world, in a way that it's probably unimaginable for people that haven't grew up with that technology. Like, I mean, I personally have discovered VR probably 4 years ago, so not even that long ago. But somebody that's growing up, right, from 10, 11 years old, 13 years old, because that's the legal age actually to be able to use VR. I would assume that it's really going to change the whole culture, you know, in a way that we're going to see behaviors in the real life that are actually having their probably core cause in the way people interact with virtual worlds. So I think it's going to be interesting, you know, to see how this all impacts culture as a whole, considering the, you know, the new generation that's growing up on these technologies.
Yes, indeed. Even prior to widespread adoption of VR, there have been some cultural shifts in the younger generations that are, I would say, difficult for people over the age of 30 to fully understand. I have to confess, I have yet to, quote, get TikTok, or why TikTok is so popular. I understand Facebook and Twitter. I can understand Instagram to some extent, though I don't really understand the appeal of the Instagram stories that disappear after 24 hours. But with TikTok, I'm just not sure why people want to constrain themselves to 15-second videos, or what they're trying to achieve with that. But I suppose that is a cultural difference. What do you think are the main differences arising from virtual reality that will spill over into the more general culture for the younger generations?
So I haven't really thought about this specifically, but right now on the spot, I could probably think of some ways. Like, for example, just imagine, you know, a person, and maybe it's playing several hours a day, virtual reality game, and maybe in that game, some kind of gesture helps you do something, right? Like you bring something maybe from your hip, you know, a 3D object that does something. So I would assume that after you do that repeatedly, right, in a virtual world, maybe you kind of get that sensation, that reflex in the real world as well, right? So maybe when you want to do an action in the real world, you forget that, oh, I'm not in VR, so I can't pull up my, you know, thing from thin air. But I would say that, you know, if you look at computer games in the first place, right, and people that spend a lot of time playing computer games, you can already see a change of behavior, you know, probably in their physiology, right? The way they sit, maybe, you know, at a desk, and the way they kind of interact on a daily basis with their technology. Again, somebody that plays 10, 12 hours a day, it's very common right now. I would assume that impacts them, right? Certain reflexes and certain intuitive movements of the body, they probably change a little bit. But in VR, I think that's going to be way different, right? And way more impactful. Again, it's hard to tell how, because, you know, like currently we're using these controllers, right, in VR. So, you know, we're having, you know, this controller has a trigger here, a thing here. So when you grab something in VR, it kind of comes naturally that you grab like this, you know, two objects, but you actually, that you grab an object, but you actually press on two buttons. So when you think about the human nature and the way this works intuitively, you want to know exactly what you're going to do the first time you pick up these controllers, right? So the user experience has to be set up in a way where I kind of already know, I might have to pull something in VR, or I might have to, grab certain things. And after that probably gets repeated a certain amount of times. I would say that it comes as a reflex, right? In a way where how we currently grab our phone, right? And check our notifications. We're probably going to have some similar gestures that are going to be in an unconscious way adapted in our daily behaviors without us even knowing, probably.
Yes, that is quite fascinating. Go ahead.
Back to you, Gennady, about TikTok. Think of the similarity between TikTok and Twitter. It's a matter of small attention span. They only each thing needs small attention. It's like instead of giving you one big cookie, they give you 1,000 little cookies, something like that. And what does this teach us about the way our attention spans are manipulated?
Yes, people's attention spans have become so fragmented that even a 10-minute video is seen as long by some. And well, Instagram now places a 15-minute limit on the videos there, which also would not be enough for a lot of in-depth exploration. But I do think we have this soundbite culture that's actually a carryover from legacy media. So from the era of cable television news programs, which still exist, where everything was in these very brief sound bites that often simplified a complex and nuanced situation. Now, it's interesting, too, to think that a lot of the common terms for essentially the environment of a PC come from the analog era, or from an era that is not even within memory of a lot of the younger people alive today. For instance, a desktop was supposed to be a simulation of a physical desk that was used for productivity purposes. Now, a lot of knowledge workers today don't use their desks that way anymore, where they arrange specific items in specific places to use to achieve certain tasks. Mostly they use their desks just as repositories of whatever they happen to have right now in the physical world, but they use their computer spaces for productivity. Or the save icon. The save icon looks like a floppy disk. I think those of us on the panel right now remember the floppy disks, but many of the younger people today, people under the age of 25 perhaps, have never physically interacted with a floppy disk. So that save icon has kind of taken on a cultural meaning of its own, even though the technology that originally motivated it is now obsolete.
Yeah.
So now let's go to Jason. Jason, what are your concluding remarks?
Yeah, Sever, I was wondering what you might think about this. I got kind of a vision of what I kind of think might happen and what I kind of hope will happen. I think that eventually there will be like this, the VR, AR, augmented reality. There'll be an entire world overlapping the real world. Like if you got your whole backyard LiDAR scanned, and if it's being LiDAR scanned in real time, and I don't know, a dog jumps over your fence, you should be able to see the computer generated image of the dog running by. And, theoretically, we should be able to go to France and actually see the people that are walking by, only would be like ghosts to them. And I imagine, I don't know how much the lag would be, but we might be able to have stuff on the moon. Might be able to walk around on the moon, or or wherever.
So I'm sure it should be possible. Magic Leap, actually, which was one of the companies I mentioned previously, the AR company, that was actually their mission statement in a way, where they were building another layer, a digital layer of reality on top of the physical reality. And again, seems like, $2 billion and some of the best people in the world were not enough to achieve that. So I also know that there is a company that just got acquired, I think by Apple or Google. I can't remember the name right now, but they're mapping out the whole world pretty much with, LiDAR scanners. So we pretty much have something close to that, with Google Maps. Like how I do the street view mode on my phone on Google Apps, on Google Maps, and I can, kind of scroll around and look around like this in a 3D way. I can access that with my VR headset as well. But this time, I'm I'm on the street where Google Maps kind of shows me, and I can look around with my head without having to scroll. But again, the Google Maps quality compared to, what you were mentioning, a nice LiDAR scanned, 3D environment. It's coming. I just don't know when. And again, a company that, there were two companies that officially stated this as their mission. One of them was Magic Leap, but they pivoted, and the other one got acquired. So I assume that the second one that got acquired were doing the right thing, since, a major player like Apple or Google came and grabbed them.
Yes, and it is quite fascinating that it's possible to have fully immersive virtual travel today just with Google Maps and a VR headset.
Yeah.
So now let us go to Art Ramon. Art Ramon, what are your concluding remarks?
Yes, I can attest to the immersive nature of VR. And, playing Pavlov VR, it's a little scary at first. It takes some conditioning. You get frightened by someone shooting you around the corner. But the zombie game in Pavlov VR is extremely frightening. I mean, it sends my fight or flight response to the roof. And I've only been able to play a little bit of it. I think if I tried to condition myself to play more, I'd have really bad nightmares. So there's nothing worse than having that zombie, invade your personal space while it's clawing at you, and you're trying to fumble around with that pistol and changing the mag, and it's very immersive and realistic. And I challenge anyone who thinks lowly of VR to play the Pavlov VR zombie game. So thank you for coming, Sever.
Yeah, thank you for the update about Pavlov. I actually am very familiar with the game. Believe it or not, I never actually downloaded the game. I've seen the new World War II upgrade, and people just love that game. It's like the best shooter game, for VR in general. But too bad we can't get it on the official store. I mean, for the developer, I'm thinking, he's missing out on millions of dollars right now. Just because he's selling it through a secondary store and kind of, I would say on the side, right? Instead of doing it officially. But, it just proves that if the product is great, they're still going to get their hands on it. And I should try Pavlov also. You kind of sold me on it right now because I forgot about it for a while.
Well, it's interesting that this highly popular game was able to use an indirect means to get to consumers working around essentially a platform issue whereby it's not available in the primary store.
Yeah. Because as I said, the Quest store currently has so high standards, and I don't know exactly what they're taking in consideration other than the quality standards. To the point where I think they're overdoing it, to a certain extent. So maybe the developer, who's obviously talented, the guy who built the game, or it's a team of people, I'm not too sure, but he probably didn't want to put up with all the extra stuff. So yeah, he released it like that.
That makes sense. All right, now let us go to David Shoemaker. David, please proceed.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for coming today. Education is an area that interests me a lot. And I'm wondering if you know of any major players or trends in using VR in the near term for education.
So I don't know of any official ones because education is also a slow sector. And I think in order for it to officially be introduced, as a technology, I'm not too sure if it's at the school level or, maybe public schools, you have to deal with the government, probably even more bureaucracy. And there's also, an investment for them to get the headsets. In China, I've seen some classes that are using the HTC Vive for education. But specific apps in education VR that are useful, I'm trying to think of some right now. I can't really come up with any that I've tried personally, but there is immersiveeducation.com, who I can, kind of remember their name. They are doing, some kind of history lessons through VR. So they're immersing the people in, the historical environment of the specific lesson that they're presenting. They're also doing training and educational content for different industries, like not specifically in school, but, education for people that are working on maybe like an oil rig or something that in order for you to learn in the real world would take too much risk, right? In order to learn how to operate an oil rig or all that heavy hardware, you can, first try it through VR. But specifically companies that I can recommend or that I know of and that I can vouch for, I wouldn't be, I would say, comfortable saying any names right now, just because I think that a teacher or, a therapist, but if you was to take this specific example, a teacher can really make the class however interactive they want to. So if a teacher probably wants to put together, a program like this, I'm not too sure if the school would, sponsor, at least the headsets. But on the software side, I mean, on the actually preparing a course in VR, it can be done with little to no cost to you as a teacher. If you're asking me from that perspective, you just have to be creative in what you're using, to deliver it. But there's still, this hardware issue that a lot of schools and a lot of education facilities don't have the hardware. So that should be addressed first, to give the, kids or whatever adults or students that you're working with, they need to have access to the hardware. And even if there's a batch probably purchased for the whole school, a set of 30 headsets or so, and each class can, use them one by one, then that's more of a feasible approach. But as far as the, software, it really depends on what you're trying to do, because I can teach a lesson about, World War II again, and I can go in Pavlov and actually show the kids, from a soldier perspective, hey, look, this is how, it used to be. But if I want to, again, present, maybe I have a lecture about mindfulness, or maybe I have a lecture about, who knows, I'm looking here at different things of maybe, again, teaching people about a certain maybe sport. You can practice basketball, you can practice any imaginable sport or activity, in VR that you can do in the real world. So it would be just up to the, again, teachers' customization for each class. Of course, if they want to take a more, I would say free, low cost, easy route. If you want to develop your own solution and to kind of create the whole, curriculum, that's possible also. It just takes more time, and I'm not too familiar with any companies that have something, I would say, thoroughly put together from that point of view.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with your thoughts about acquisition for equipment in schools and that sort of thing. I've been involved in remote education, both as a student and as an instructor. And as computers became more commonplace, this was for adult students. So as computers became more commonplace, then the remote training morphed more into a desktop type of an experience. And that made it easy to do for knowledge content classes. And then whiteboarding and so forth, helped additionally. And what I'm looking hopefully for in the next decade or more would be things that would traditionally maybe have to be done like in a laboratory setting. And that's where I can see VR coming on. I haven't seen any of that yet, and that's the reason that I asked that question. But I think it will follow, maybe starting at that level. Private universities, private technical schools, for them to be able to acquire and experiment with new technology is easier than, say, for government-funded schools. So, yeah, thanks for your answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sever. And I did post a link to the website you mentioned. It is immersiveeducation.org, and it is the site of the Immersive Education Initiative. So yes, they do have some university partners. They've partnered with the United States National Park Service and the Ministry of Education in Italy to provide various learning experiences, but it does seem that more individualized approaches where people use various VR resources for an educational purpose, but may not necessarily design software specifically with education in mind, would be more widespread. And there is a lot in this technology that could give people a much better awareness of history, or say simulate a lab experiment. If you don't want to actually dissect a frog, you can have a virtual dissection, which I think would be just as good in terms of teaching the content of the biology lesson in question. So now the time has come to hear the concluding remarks of our guests. So Sever, thank you for joining us these past 3 hours for an excellent conversation on virtual reality technology and possible future directions. We have learned a lot about the current state of the technology, and we're grateful to you for that. How would you sum up this conversation? Is there anything else that you would like to say? Any directions in which you would like to take it, or ideas you would like to put forth for our consideration?
Well, yeah. So, probably the first observation I want to make is the fact that I don't work for any of the companies that I presented today. I have no affiliation whatsoever with any of them. And, if I sometimes speak in favor of VR more than against it, it's just because of my personal passion and interest in the space. But again, I try to keep everything as objective as possible. So that's a full disclosure I want to make. Yeah, I'm not affiliated with any of these companies that I presented. On another note, I would say that it's interesting as a space if you're into sci-fi technologies and you probably haven't picked up a new device of that nature in years, right? Because until 2016, 17, until I got my first VR headset, I had no idea, about the space, and I wasn't really too excited about something that, I have no idea how it works or how impactful it is. But I would say that right now it's finally at a point where anyone that's interested can grab a headset, and try to experience the, I would say, amazing sensation that comes with, the virtual reality experience as a, overall. And I don't know if anybody's interested in investments, or I probably think it's a good place right now to invest in VR companies. If you want to, grab some companies at seed stage, maybe early. There are some companies that are doing crowdsourcing where you can actually get some equity, in some of those projects. And I can say that I personally am very excited about what's coming. I hope for our project to, have a great impact, and we're probably gonna talk about that. And I'm gonna share with you, at a later time when we have something to show in those regards. And other than that, I'm just glad to be able to be here, and I hope that the information was helpful. I hope that, at least from a curiosity point of view, I was able to give you more details so you can have a better idea about what it takes to get into VR. And all I can recommend is that if you're passionate and if you want to get into this space, right now is probably the best time to do it, whether from an investment point of view, whether from a consumer, pure user perspective. And also, as a transhumanist, and as a person that's interested in sci-fi technologies, right? It's better to let your own imagination dictate, I would say, the vision for the future of VR. Compared to what it currently is, I think every single person is going to have their own insight and vision to in regards to what can become. So I highly recommend that. Probably right now it's harder to actually go and do a test. Like Microsoft stores and other stores were having like headsets to actually test out the technology before you buy it. Right now with Corona, I assume that's not available anymore. But if you can get your hands on a headset, I would highly suggest, that you do so, just even out of curiosity. You might be overly impressed, I would say.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sever, for those remarks and for all of the extremely helpful answers and descriptions of these technologies that you provided. Hopefully a lot of our viewers will go out and experiment with these technologies and see how they can benefit their lives. And of course, eventually in the Virtual Enlightenment Salon series, we had to discuss virtual reality, but this is the spirit of the Virtual Enlightenment Salon venue, where we address technologies, we address cultural issues, political issues, various disciplines that all pertain to the human condition and the future of humanity. And we, in particular, explore their interrelationships. So this was a great session for doing that. And next Sunday, on January 31st, we're going to have a guest from Belarus, Alexander Griboyev, who is a transhumanist there. And we are going to have a very interesting conversation about the state of transhumanism in the Russian-speaking world. So our viewers will have that to look forward to. And until then,